Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Abogo and Tay Kofi.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Shine Out Loud Show. Now, I know the intro says Lillian Abogo and Tay Kofi. Tonight, I am without the man with the bow tie and that incredible voice. Tay Kofi cannot be with us tonight, so you guys just get me. It's a girl show tonight. This is all about us as women. So you get me, Lillian Abogo, tonight, and we are going to be talking about a couple of things. First and foremost, we're going to be talking about this idea and concept of networking in the same way that the old boys network do. But before we do, we have to actually start in on the piece about what happened in London 1 week ago. 1 week ago till this day, 1 week ago, London was under attack. Some have used the T word, some have used various, words like coward, crashing into, human beings, taking lives. And so, you know what? I'm actually going to start with my so loud moment very early, and let me get this out there. My so loud moment is the celebration of everybody that came out from their buildings, people on the streets, our NHS staff that left the building at St. Thomas's Hospital and rushed out to help the injured and dying. My hat's off to all of you. The nurses and doctors that ran out without thought of their own personal safety. My hat's off to you. And to that officer that died in the service of others. We, as London, we honor your sacrifice. We honor what you've done. And to those nurses and doctors, we celebrate each and every one of you. And the reason why we wanted to talk about this on the show tonight was after this tragedy, after this incident, someone decided that they were going to look at pictures from it and, make a point. There was a young Muslim woman with her brown headscarf on, and she was walking through this scene. And the caption from Twitter was that she was on her phone and the person was casting aspersion against this young woman saying, oh, she didn't even care. She's just walking through the scene of destruction and carnage and she's on her phone all nonchalant. Now, the one thing about London that I have to actually celebrate is the fact that when we want to get vocal in defense of someone, we do. We get behind. And the response for this young woman was amazing in her defense. The defense of this young Muslim woman was just phenomenal. And, it's not even that was a major issue, was because in the very same image, the very same shot, was a Caucasian young man marching through that scene with the same care, what looked like care and abandon. We don't know what were in the minds of these individuals. They could be shocked, they could be terrified, they're thinking, I need to get away from this scene very quickly. The young woman looked absolutely petrified. And she looked scared, but someone decided that because she looked Muslim in terms of her dress and she looked Asian, that she therefore represented everything that was wrong with the world and wanted to make an example of her. Sir, to you, London has responded. We do not take kindly to such messages. We do not just actually point out people as being the scapegoat for somebody else's crimes. So yes, London responded and in such an excellent way. And I think another, my other so loud moment, because Tate is not here, I get to have two. My other so loud moment for the week is actually to my incredible media assistant, because without her, we will not have a show tonight. So Nicole, tonight you have been my absolute savior. Thank you so much. She's sitting behind me grinning, but seriously, people, without her, we will not have a show tonight. We had some major hiccups, and I am so grateful to this young woman. So yeah, we're going to get into the whole scenario tonight, and we're talking about networking in this way that men do. Now, most Fortune 500 companies, we already know what the issues are globally on boards. You have more men than you have women. You have these so-called old boys network that keep these jobs within themselves. They keep themselves promoted. They actually support each other. And so the idea is, and this is not just for women. The idea is that do we as people of color, do we as women start to look at if there are not seats on these tables, do we start creating a network for ourselves that will get us in this room, or B, get us creating these rooms for ourselves? Now, if you want to connect in, send us a voice note on WhatsApp to those of you that have my number. To others, join us on the chat room. Go to Spreaker.com and join us and chat live, because we're talking about how we can actually connect and say, how do we get into these rooms? How do we make sure that we actually are developing ourselves? We're actually supporting each other into these positions. And this is what we wanted to talk about tonight. So we're waiting for the questions to come in. And I think our first thing is that if we look at most of these networks, we look at any Fortune 500 companies, we have a situation where it is seriously being run by these networks, because their jobs advertised. There are jobs that are actually not advertised. There are jobs that are created through these networks, and no matter how skilled and qualified, how personable, sometimes you just won't find out about these because you're not in the room. You're not on the golf courses. You're not in the places where these conversations are being had and being held. So the fact is, you are not in that circle and you're not in the know. Now, I'm not saying that this is acceptable or this is right, but this is a situation that we experience. And so maybe we need to actually step away from this whole idea of being the only minority in the room, the only woman, and actually put ourselves in a position to say, once we step into one of these positions, our job is not to slam the door shut behind us, but actually make room for others, or create scenarios where we can actually network for ourselves and actually create these networks where we have startup companies right now where you have women and men of color who are creating startups without the resources, but yet are not networking in a way powerful enough to actually affect change. So if you have something to say, join us in the chat room. Go to Spreaker.com and find us on our Shine Out Loud show and hit the live chat button. It will be fun to have you join us. So while we're waiting and we are talking about it, we had some questions come in, and we're looking at the idea of, are women more actually, if we're looking at it saying with these networks and this situation, that women also have the double disadvantage. And if you remember the book by Sheryl Sandberg, we're talking about where women were disadvantaged in terms of they were seen as, especially between the ages of 25 and 45 during the childbearing ages, that women were disadvantaged because they will go off to have children, they will come back and given lesser responsibilities. And so women were either not taking that time out to have a family, or were opting out of their careers for their family. So these are the kind of situations that I want us to actually investigate and look at deeply. So let's see what our phone is saying, and see whether we have some voice notes coming in and WhatsApp messages, which will be fun to get. Oh, we have a couple of messages coming in. And so we are looking at the messages and going, yes, there is a case of women being disadvantaged. There are areas where women are not being seen. And we are actually, there is the need for us to network. There is the need for us to actually change how we network. There is a need to start looking at networking, not just from a social gathering or just gathering to hand out business cards, but how can we network effectively as people of color to make effective change? And what is missing for us to actually be in those rooms? So this is the question that we're asking. So wait for you to join in. Now, we had Daniel sent in from Nigeria, and again, going back to the double standards about women with children face at work, the perceived less commitment, where actually women are penalized. Women are penalized, and this is not just in Nigeria, this is a global situation. And if we are looking at that, then here's my question. What are we doing wrong? What are we doing wrong? And especially now, we're talking about equality in the workplace. We're talking about leaning into careers, yet we're still not making that inroads. We're still the token woman, the token person of color in those rooms. So are we not in the position to affect the change? Are we not in have we not gained, I think that's the word, the traction to say, well, we want to network together. We want to actually produce and affect change. We want to say, if you will not let me in that room, then I'm going to build my own room. And we have a lot of businesses that have been started up since 2008, since the crash. There's actually been an increased study that shows that the fastest group of business owners are actually women of color, and this is globally. Women of color are actually the fastest business creators by far. And so when you add to that, you add in the tech industry where a lot of startups are coming through. So why are we managing to create it at that level without the resource? What do we need to go from where we are to actually produce a different result? How can we actually take on that model of old boy networking? And here's the thing, with the old boy networking, people are thinking, well, it's not right, it is, it isn't. That's not what we're discussing today. So I'm going to ask Nicole. Nicole, you've been doing the research today about the old boys network. What do you think? She's sitting here shell shocked. But, she's hiding behind the laptop at the moment. But the fact of the matter is, we need to actually change how we network. We need to change what we're saying, what we're doing, and actually where we are going to network. Because if we want to have the right kind of circle, the right kind of information, we need to actually change where we are. Because we're not going to find out about these information if we're not around the right circle. And this comes out to who is in your circle, who are your mentors, who are you actually emulating and have around you that is actually change, that actually can actually get you to the position that you want to be in. And so we've had a couple of tweets in, and so we are getting a little bit of traction with this conversation tonight. And if you, like I said, drop us an email at letstalk@Shine Out Loud Show, or send us some tweets at Shine Out Show. Even send us an Instagram, because I can't speak this evening. Trust me, it's one of those evenings. But yes, so tweet us at Shine Out Loud Show and on our Instagram page, and let's find out what your thoughts are. What are your thoughts on our networking and how we network and what we need to do different? So if we're saying it, if you do not want me part of your room, let's build our own. And this is indicative, because if we are not ready to stand up and be in our rooms, or actually be in that space that says, I am worthy of this space, we're never going to get there. If we're waiting for the permission to say, well, let somebody else help you into the room. Yeah, you need the mentors. You need someone else to sometimes to hold your hand, not literally, but to say, give you the directions to get to that position. But if we're finding that it's not coming, then the onus is on us to actually get into that space. The onus is on us to actually find a way in, find a way to create it, to find a way of actually saying, well, okay, that space is not there, then I'll create it. I will be outstanding. And yes, we know as people of color, sometimes we are expected to work harder, longer, without the same level of appreciation. But we have to, at this point, have to say, when do we no longer wait for that permission and say, well, we are going to build the next Fortune 500 company. We are going to use the established business models to build our Fortune 500 companies. I mean, looking at the model that Richard Branson has, what did he know about flying a plane? Richard Branson knew nothing about flying a plane, but he had the acumen behind him. Yes, he had some support, but what he did was he got the people who knew what they were doing behind him and into the room. And he created his own room. And now he is Richard Branson, that is this mega brand that has so many different franchises in terms of different businesses, which are licensed out, which I actually discovered the other week. So if we are not being put in the room, then we need to actually find a way to support ourselves into creating the rooms. We need to start saying, logically, let's stop. Let's look at this. What's going on? How are we networking? Who are we networking with? And maybe the first thing is changing how we network, because the whole idea is when we get into a networking situation, we exchange business cards and get into a very short-sighted relationship where it's transactional. Well, I will do a quick business with you, and if you don't do business with me, then that's it. We are not on speaking terms anymore, or so and so and so. Maybe it's not that short-term, short-sighted thinking that we need. Maybe it's actually strategic partnerships. Maybe the person that you're networking may not be the one to use your service, but what they have and what they do can support your service and support each other on the platform and take each other further. So till we start thinking outside of the area, if we start thinking outside of just our short-sighted needs and goals. And sometimes, yes, we do have the needs and goals of wanting the transaction, the cash to keep our business going. But if we start looking at strategic partnership, because that's what these networks are based on, strategic partnership, building long-term relationships, find is the whole essence of the schools that you attend, the networks that you build up from parents and family. We don't have that. Most of us do not have that. We do not attend the private schools. We haven't attended the red brick universities. We haven't attended those particular colleges that can afford us those networks. But that does not preclude us from actually creating our own. So yes, there are things stacked against people of color in this situation, but does not preclude us from saying, yes, we acknowledge, yes, we understand this, and we're still going to go ahead and create something that stands. So whether we choose to lean in, lean out, but we need to start looking at networking as strategic partnerships that we can then build a platform that builds. So we have a question coming in, and yes, Daniel, what's your question? So he's just sending us a question via Twitter, so waiting for that WhatsApp actually for that to come through, and I'll see what it is in a quick second. And while he's coming with that, we're going to actually go via a question that's coming in about whether this applies just to women who are not part of this network, or is this for just people of color? I think it's actually for people of color, because yes, women are, across the color barrier, women are largely underrepresented in boards. For every boardroom where there's 10 men, you have one woman, be it a non-Caucasian woman or a Caucasian woman. But then for every one of those boards, it's less likely to be a person of color. And so that's where we are coming in. And that's why we're looking at how can we change the situation and how can we support. So the question is still coming in. We're waiting for those questions coming in. And I think Norman had a question around what is the solution? There isn't one simple solution. But I think the idea where we get comfortable with being the only person in the room is actually the issue. Where we get almost uncomfortable and comfortable at the same time at being the only person in the room, that we do not actively seek out others, because the old style of thinking is, if I seek out others like myself, they will take my position. I don't want to be associated with being, it's a black issue or it's a color issue. And I think that till we actually get into our mindset that it's our responsibility to hold those doors open once we get in. It's our responsibility, if those networks do not exist, to create one. Because if we don't, we're still going to be having the same conversation in 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time. So the onus becomes on us. So the question has come through that what policies you think organizations should put in place so there can be gender equality. Now it's funny because this question, Daniel, may think that only applies to women. I think that for there to be gender equality, there has to be the freedom that even men get to say, well, you know what, if I want to opt out of my career so I can take care of my children, I have that opportunity. It has to be equal on both sides. The policy has to be more flexible working options, that you can work from home. Now we've seen, I think it was last week or the week before, where the expert for, I think it was BBC or Sky, was conducting an interview at home, and I think the world has seen how that can be complicated with his children barging in on that interview. But working from home, so flexible working practices, the fact that having a child does not diminish a woman's commitment to her career, that is not an either or. I think going back to situations where you can have crash facilities in buildings. I do know right now there's a building in the UK where there is a crash facility for people to work. So there has to be options, and I think if we take away the onus on child rearing from women, being that the whole child care situation needs to be handled by the mother, we'll kind of be able to change that dynamic. It will actually change that, the woman has to be the primary responsible caregiver if the fact that the situation is taken away from her, where it's both partners raising the child, it's both partners actively involved, then both partners can actually make choices around their career with support from the employers. And actually maybe more and more women are opting out of careers to actually start their own businesses. This may be a moot point at some point, but I think gender equality till we actually get men involved in that conversation of gender equality, we will never have gender equality. Because if we keep having the conversation that it impacts women alone, that the inequality that women face is a woman issue, not a people issue, we will never have the gender equality in the workplace that we're looking for. And that's just my 2 cents, to be quite honest. That is just my 2 cents. That is my thought on the matter. So we do need gender equality. We do need policies to support that. But also we need to have men in that conversation when we are discussing the gender issue, because it's not a woman issue, it's a people issue. Because if half of humanity are facing issues that affect them being able to work, affect them, how they get paid, then it's not a woman issue, it's a humanity issue. Because as men who have mothers, wives, sisters, daughters, you do not want to live in a world where these people who you are connected to face this. So that, I hope that answers your question. And let's see if we have any other questions coming through, and if we have anything else coming through on Twitter. So tonight, just in case you're just tuning in, we are talking about networking in the way of the Old Boys Network. And we are looking at how we can actively use the same system to actually further our careers, get into boardrooms, create Fortune 500 companies of our own. If we do not have the access to these companies, if we do not have access to these boardrooms, then I think the onus on us is to start thinking of our business, not just as a small business or a side business, but as a next future 500 company. I know people who are changing the face of how PR is done in the people of color industry. There are women who are pulling some really incredible clients. Now, her company should be in the next few years along lines of that of Saatchi & Saatchi. nothing stops her from developing her company to that extent. So, we need to stop looking at our business as small businesses and start looking at it as the next potential Fortune 500 company. We need to start looking at, well, can we develop our business to a point that we can sell it? We can syndicate it. We can grow it, that we then have an IPO on it. So if we actually think about it logically, Facebook started in someone's bedroom, Google started in a garage, and WhatsApp started after someone was rejected for a position. So if we actually logically think about it, nothing stops us. Yes, we have disadvantages. We do not have the resources. We do not have the networks. But I think the conversation we're having today is about building those networks for ourselves and actually finding a way to fund. And this comes down to the crucial issue. How do we fund our projects? I think right now, if you look around, in fact, I guarantee if you Google the term peer support and peer-to-peer lending, that is out there. It's happening. People are growing businesses that way. Now, we need to start looking at new ways of looking to finance our businesses if the traditional methods are too hard or too difficult. Find a group of friends, fund your business. Find someone to invest in you, borrow the money within a group and say, well, let's put the money together. Let's grow this together and actually pay dividends back. So there are ways of doing it, because if companies are currently doing peer-to-peer lending to develop properties, buy land and develop properties currently in the UK and the US as a business model, what stops us from doing it? What stops us from using that same business model to get ahead in our businesses and actually create a business that we can then sell or put on the IP, get an IP on it? I guess it's how are we thinking about our businesses will change how we then choose to network and build those circles. So I think that's basically me tonight. So without sounding preaching and getting down this road, but I think that's where I'm going to take it, is what are we doing to build our own networks? What are we doing to create a situation to actually change the dynamics? If we're still finding that the old boy network lives and exists and it's too difficult to break through, should we consider not fighting that fight, but should we start considering building our own core networks? If you have anything to contribute to this, drop me an email at letstalk@shineoutloud.tv. Drop us a tweet, send us a message on Instagram, and let's talk about this, because we're going to continue to talk about this after this show. We're going to blog about this. We're going to talk about this a bit longer. We're going to keep this going. And we're going to talk about what we need to do to stop thinking of our businesses as small businesses and start thinking about them as the next potential Fortune 500 company. So I've been Lillian Abogo, and you're going to catch us next week, where we have not just one, we have two amazing guests on the show, and we'll be talking about their documentary, The Adventures Across Africa, and all their exciting projects. So join us next week at 8 p.m. on Wednesday via Spreaker.com, or go onto our website, which is www.shineoutloudshow.tv. I'm Lillian Abogo, and this has been the show.
Everyone has a bright light inside of them that deserves to be seen by the world. That's why it's time to shine the light on the extraordinary who are accomplishing phenomenal things. This is the Shine Out Loud Show with Lillian Abogo and Tay Kofi.